So Nintendo just dropped a brand new Donkey Kong game, and out of nowhere, they hit us with Kid Pauline. Yeah, the OG damsel in distress from like 1981. Now she's a kid again, front and center in a brand new game, and now the internet is doing what the internet does best. Trying to fit this game in some sort of DK timeline. And if you didn't even know that Donkey Kong had a timeline, buckle up, King, or Kong, or not King Kong, that's different, whatever. The thing is, DK doesn't really have a timeline. And yet, fans are spiraling to make sense of where this all fits. And honestly, that urge, that's just not fandom behavior. That's creator gold. Because if you make stories, and like specifically comics for this channel, this is exactly how you keep a series alive. Thinking about what else could fit into your timeline without breaking the whole thing. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video. What I call echo points. An echo point is a passing moment, a throwaway line, background detail, a joke that wasn't meant to set up a future story, but later becomes the seed for something bigger. It's not foreshadowing, it's not a retcon, it's an echo. Something that was already there, coming back louder the second time. Kid Pauline, now she is the perfect example. She's been a dusty relic of the DK lore since forever. Now suddenly she's headlining a brand new game. But there's no lore breaking with that. There's no retcon. It's just a clever reuse of something that we all kind of forgot about. So let me show you what I mean. The best stories do this all the time, intentionally or not. And I'll address it. Yes, this DK thing serves the algorithm very well. But that is genuinely the thing that made me impressed with this whole idea, because Pauline is just such a random yet genius switch up to the Donkey Kong series. But I swear, that is the last of the algorithm survey topics that I'll be talking about in this video. What? I'm actually going to be talking about the animated trilogy, not the new live-action film. In the first How to Train Your Dragon movie, Toothless's species, the Night Furies, are this terrifying mystery. Nobody's seen one and lived to tell the tale, until Hiccup shoots one down and befriends it. Boom. That's all you need. It's a standalone film. Dragons are dangerous, this kid befriends one. Let's see how the village reacts. Movie 2. We're busy expanding the world, meeting new dragons, new cultures. The only thing we hear about Night Furies in this film is a throwaway line from Hiccup's mom. She says something like, she hasn't seen one in years, or she's never seen one before. I can't remember exactly, and I'm too lazy to pull up the clip, but it was just the only mention of Night Furies in that whole film. And you think nothing of it. But then by movie 3, the villain is a legendary Night Fury killer. Toothless's entire species becomes the heart of the story. Extinction, legacy, identity. Suddenly that tiny detail from the last two movies echoes back hard, and gives the final emotional weight to this trilogy. That's an echo point done right. No rewrite, no forced twist, just something small turning massive later on. Same thing with Bleach, which used to be one of my most favorite mangas growing up. Early on, we hear about the Quincy's. They're extinct, we're told, except for one guy with glasses hanging out with Ichigo's crew. I can't remember his name. I think it's like Urudu or Uru or something. Again, too lazy to look it up. You're just gonna have to take my word for it. So yeah, glasses guy. Cool, moving on. We want to watch the sword fights in the hollows. Hundreds of chapters later, boom, the Quincy's are back, baby. And not just surviving, but central to the biggest war in the series. And it doesn't feel forced, because that seed was always there, just echoing in the background. Until someone finally said, what if we explored that? And sometimes echo points aren't even about forgotten lore, it's just logic. End of Inside Out 1, Riley's a kid. Sequel rolls around, puberty hits, new emotions join the party. Obvious, but exciting. It's not a twist or a retcon, it's just what naturally happens next. So how do you find echo points in your own work without pulling a Disney and just spinning a wheel of random side characters? There's 3 places I always look. So first up, echo points you never meant to make. My favorite kind of storytelling accident. You're writing your comic, tossing in jokes, a random background detail, a side character who says 3 funny lines, and you're like, cool, moving on. But years later, that nothing moment suddenly feels like the richest vein of story gold that you've ever had. This is why unintentional info matters. It's not foreshadowing, it's just something that existed with no ulterior motives or set up for like any sequel potential. But because it's authentic, it feels organic when you revisit it later. And Adventure Time might have the best example of this, with Fiona and Cake. These two literally started as a one-off gag, just a gender-swapped fan-servicey special that felt like, haha, what if, right? The kind of thing you expect to pop up once, get a few laughs, and vanish forever. But every time they showed up, they felt realer. The lore got thicker. The concept got funnier and cooler. And years later, they've got their own HBO series that somehow takes that joke premise and turns it into something wild, emotional, and genuinely brilliant. They didn't break Adventure Time's canon to do it. They didn't shove in a bunch of retcons. They just kept letting this little accident detail echo louder and louder until suddenly it was a full-blown story that pushed the Land of Ooo to new creative heights. And honestly, that's what good echo points do. They make you go from, haha, funny bit, to, wait, this is actually the coolest thing in my whole universe. Breaking Bad gives Saul a throwaway line about having a brother. Cool. Doesn't matter, never comes up again, until years later. That single line turns into a whole prequel series, and actually one of the best spin-offs ever made. Imagine being Vince Gilligan in 2008, writing, yeah, Saul has a brother, just to make him sound like a real guy. And a decade later, you're mining that molehill for Emmy Gold. That's an echo point. That's how tiny nothing details can turn into something massive if you pay attention to your own work later on. Meanwhile, some creators drop a random detail like, yeah, he has a twin brother. And then by sequel time, that twin is a cyborg ninja assassin who is secretly behind everything. Like, yeah, okay, we can tell that you planned that all along. Like totally. So moral of the story? Never underestimate the random crap you throw into your comic. Sometimes the thing you didn't even care about is what sticks with readers, and what makes a killer follow-up later. Second kind of echo point, the boring sounding but actually genius one, world building logic. Oh my god, world building logic. If A happened, then B should follow after. This is just asking, what would naturally happen next? If you set something up in your story, what's the obvious ripple effect or consequence? The best sequels and spin-offs aren't just pulling things out of thin air. They're following the rules that were already laid down. And if you think that sounds too simple, yeah, it is. But that's why it works. Let's take a look at Shrek. In movie 1, Shrek marries Fiona, the curse is broken, happily ever after. Great. Movie 2 says, now what would happen when you meet the in-laws? It's the logical next step, but it opens up so much comedy gold. Shrek's insecurities, Fiona's royal family drama, awkward dinner scenes, perfect sequel setup baked right into the first movie's ending. Neighbors 1 is family versus frat, so what do you do for a sequel? Same setup, but with a sorority. It's not reinventing the wheel, it's just turning it one more time. You already know the premise works, you already know the tone, you just ask, what's the next version of this problem? And boom, story writes itself. For the Madagascar series, the first movie, the animals get stuck in Madagascar. The sequel, they try to leave. Where do they end up? Africa. Geography writes that sequel for you. You literally just have to follow the map. And honestly, that's better than half the stuff Hollywood tries to overcomplicate. Sometimes your next story isn't a twist, it's just connecting the dots that you already drew. This is where a lot of franchises screw up. Instead of asking, what would happen naturally next? They're like, oh, what if aliens, or time travel, or the villain's ghost possessed a toaster? And suddenly this sequel feels like fan fiction. Like, calm down. You had a good thing going, just finish the thought you already started. So yeah, world building logic is your built-in sequel machine. You don't need a galaxy brain it. Just ask yourself, if this happened, what would people logically do next? If the answer's interesting, congrats, you've got yourself a follow-up story. Alright, so the last and third echo point. It's my favorite one because it's messy and chaotic, and honestly, it hits the hardest. Emotional ripples. Here's what I mean. Every story ends with some kind of emotional blast radius. Decisions were made, people got hurt, lives were changed. And just because you rolled credits doesn't mean those consequences politely just disappeared, excused themselves right out. A good follow-up doesn't just ask, what's the next event? It asks, who's still bleeding out from the last one? And there's probably no stronger example for this than The Last of Us Part 2. Game 1 ends. Joel makes that choice. If you know, you know. The entire plot is everyone dealing with the fallout of one man's questionable moral compass. No new villain needed, sort of, just the consequences finally catching up. The Spider-Verse series. Miles Morales is the only Spider-Man who doesn't follow the usual tragic script, sort of. And in the sequel, that uniqueness becomes a problem. Suddenly being special isn't fun anymore. It's a multiverse-wide identity crisis. Emotional ripples, baby. In Game of Thrones, Ned Stark's death is the ultimate ripple effect. Dude dies in season 1, and yet every war, betrayal, and trauma in that world somehow traces back to his beheading. The War of the Five Kings, because Ned called out the Lannisters. Rob's downfall, avenging his dad. Sansa and Arya's entire character arcs, growing up in the wreckage of their father's execution. The whole show is one long chain reaction of this guy getting his head chopped off in episode 9. If that's not an echo point, I don't know what is. One decision, one death, reshaping 8 seasons of story. So if you're looking for sequel material, don't just add lore. Ask yourself what choices your characters made last time and who's still paying the price. That's where your sequel lives. Sometimes the next story isn't new at all. It's just the aftershocks finally catching up to everyone. Alright, let's talk about the bad kind of echoes. The ones that make you wish the franchise had just stopped. You know the ones. Oh no, suddenly someone's long lost mom or dad, sibling, pops, grandma, Mima, whatever, just pops up out of nowhere. And we're all supposed to care? Finding Dory is a perfect example. Look, Dory already had a family. They were orange and had clown makeup on. We solved that emotional core in the first movie. Found family, done. Wrapped in a neat Pixar bow. But no, we gotta dredge up another real family out of nowhere because reasons. Because you wanted to cry at a Pixar movie? That's not an Echo. That's a cash grab disguised as a sob story. This is where you yeet all your character development out the window because you needed to reset them for a sequel plot. Wreck-It Ralph 2. Why did Ralph suddenly become this clingy, insecure mess who ruins the internet for attention? Where did the independent, self-accepting Ralph from movie 1 go? Did he die off screen? Was there an in-between movie we missed where Ralph just had 0 therapy sessions? Same thing in Incredibles 2. We already watched Bob learn how to parent. He literally did the whole stay-at-home dad arc. Why are we hitting copy-paste for round 2? We could have just had Elastigirl kick ass without erasing everything Bob learned. But no, gotta force that sitcom energy. My favorite, or my least favorite, oh crap, we killed the villain too early. Guess we'll just bring him back. Rise of Skywalker. Somehow, Emperor Palpatine returned. Oh, did he? Did he just crawl out of space like a cockroach and no one thought to tell us how? Man, that's not an Echo. That's a franchise in full panic mode, slapping duct tape over just a mega plot hole. It's the cinematic equivalent of emailing your teacher, sorry, my dog ate my lore, but he's fine, he's still here. Somehow. So yeah, a good Echo feels natural, earned, and like you discovered it in the story you already told. A bad Echo feels like a studio exec panicked on a Wednesday night and picked a name out of a hat. And that's the difference between a sequel that expands your world and a sequel that makes you embarrassed to admit you even liked the original. So yeah, a Donkey Kong game where Kid Pauline suddenly matters probably won't change your life, but it reminded me of this, that the best sequels, prequels, and spin-offs don't come from the hype or lore dumps. They come from looking at what you've already made and then asking, what else is hiding in there? That's what Echo Points are. Tiny moments that turn into a whole new series. Or, just go the other route. Fuck it, let's just give every side character their own gritty reboot, and I will see you at the premiere of Minions Resurrection.